Crisis after crisis, if we are not facing natural disasters, it's corruption. Generally, they say what happens in the dark will come to light, but in South Africa, this may not be the case. From time to time, given the current trajectory, we might just end up in the dark for the longest time, given Eskom's failure to keep the lights on. According to the South African Federation of Trade Unions, SAFTU, in order to see the much-needed change at the struggling power utility, a change on the top structure or management of Eskom is needed, and that's putting it mildly. SAFTU national spokesperson Trevor Shaku joins us now to discuss this along with other concerns and solutions that they suggest to this situation. Trevor, good evening. Thank you for your time. So I've just been going through your statement. The main headline says, Stage 6 indicative of a deeper crisis in society. And then just beneath that, you say, Derator must resign. Talk to me a bit more about that, your analysis of what Stage 6 symbolizes in terms of a deeper crisis and why it is that you believe the immediate solution is for Andre Derator to resign.
Thank you, Tula Sizwe, and good afternoon to the viewers of eNCA. The South African Federation of Trade Unions first and foremost look at these issues at two levels. Firstly, is that you have an Eskom executive which continues to fail to stabilize the grid at Eskom and ensure that there is an uninterrupted supply of electricity. And the second part, you have a government which has actually engineered this particular crisis by firstly coming up with policies which at the beginning of this century barred Eskom from expanding its generation capacity, but also the endemic corruption that when eventually they decided to expand the generation capacity by building Medupi and Kusile, they actually dipped into serious maladministration, mismanagement, which had stalled the completion of those power stations, which currently also contribute to the continuing crisis of power cuts which we are facing at this current moment. We think that this is an indication of not just a problem happening at Eskom, but also problems that are faced with this. We are faced with this government in relation to all other state-owned enterprises at Denel, at Prasa, at Transnet, and others. So these are key problems, these are crucial problems which our people are facing at the current moment. And we think on the basis of that, this is serious crisis which must be dealt with, firstly by dealing with those people running Eskom, but also dealing with the government that has actually engineered this crisis.
So if the crisis is multifaceted and much deeper and talks to the overall running of government and the overall running of the country and has developed over a period of time, as you describe, what would firing Andre Derator solve?
But the call to fire Andre Derator is tied to, in the same sentence or in the same paragraph, tied to the firing and the resignation of the whole of the cabinet and the ruling party that is currently steering the wheel of government in this country. Remember, there are people, experts, who have said in the recent past, especially with the crisis of load shedding deepening in this year, 2022, they've pointed out, including even previous CEOs who have shown that if you were to look at this problem of load shedding, you'd be able to you may be able to fix the problems at Eskom and stabilize the grid. They have come out to say that Eskom has the capacity to produce up to 46,000 megawatts, but it is at most able to produce up to 30,000 megawatts, which means 15,000 megawatts is constantly out of use. So if 15,000 megawatts of the capacity at Eskom is constantly in use, who is responsible to ensure that there is maintenance at that power utility, to ensure that you first and foremost ensure that when other plants trip, you have the backup electricity, which will ensure that you restore uninterrupted, you restore the power, but also ensure the uninterrupted supply of electricity. So this is the first part of our argument. But because we recognize that him alone not solve the the problem, we think that it is the ANC government which ought to be removed out of government because it is mismanaging, maladministration, corruption, and not governing this country properly.
Sure, I hear you. But I'm still keen on the immediate solutions around the power situation. Do you honestly believe that a constant power supply, a stable power supply is possible within the fleet of power stations we have right now? You rightly mentioned that figure of 46,000 megawatts installed capacity, but at any given time, we're producing something in the region of 30,000 to 32,000 at any given time. And the explanation we constantly get is to say that no matter how hard you flog this horse, to use an expression that Andre de Ruyter himself once used, it's a dead horse. These power stations are at the stage where they are. You can maintain all you want. You do it today and it breaks down tomorrow, and so on and so on. What do you say to that argument that says we're flogging a dead horse?
I think he made that expression because he was trying to justify his failures in the main. But I think around June and July, the former Eskom CEO, Jacob Maroga, appeared on eNCA in a talk with Maseo Rahlaga. And in that particular conversation, the former CEO took us into the nitty-gritties which would require the utility to be able to be fixed and stabilized so that we can be able to move out of the load shedding crisis. And we think that it is people with skills and expertise who are required in that utility who can be able to deal with this problem decisively and ensure that Eskom is restored to stability. Now, if people who have expertise beyond what we may know, engineering expertise in particular, they will tell you that you can be able to ensure that those particular stations, even though we are told they're old, they've worn out, and as a result cannot be fixed, to ensure that there is uninterrupted supply of electricity to our people. These experts who have engineering skills and are engineering professionals have told us that those, especially the CEO in that particular, the former CEO in that particular discussion, showed us that many of Eskom plants have the capacity to be able to the lifespan, which can actually span into 20 to 30 and 40 more years of running just at the basis of maintenance without having to build new power stations. So we think that it is the incompetence of the current executive and then not having the skills to fix the fleet that is actually creating problems, and not the old or the wayness of those particular stations themselves.
Yeah, and also in fairness to your argument, when he took the job under de Ruyter, he must have known that he was going to be in charge of a fleet of power stations that are that old, that are expected to continue to perform one way or another, and I guess that's part of the undertaking when he took on that job. I'm interested, lastly, though, in your other issues that you raise around the role of independent power producers. How do you see the way going forward in terms of generation of electricity in South Africa? How do you see it shaping up to the exclusion of independent power producers, particularly those that supply low carbon energy sources, given where we are in the conversation around generation of electricity globally? For instance, the difficulty of getting funding, for example, for new projects for coal-fired power stations, that any government that would come in place of the government that would have resigned, according to your call, any government that would then take power would still need to face these issues of how do you fund a coal-fired power station in 2022, 2023, when the conversation has since moved on from there, and independent power producers are part of the conversation globally?
We are for renewables. We have a position on the energy transition, and we are in favor of renewables. We believe that the climate change is a real crisis that humanity is facing today, and therefore there's a need to ensure that we reduce the emission of greenhouse gases. That's the first part. And out of that particular argument, we then have conclusions that you've got to move towards the renewables. But these renewables, in our view, should not be championed by Eskom itself, because we are for a public pathway which mainly emphasizes public ownership of energy provision, and we do not support the introduction of the independent power producers. Independent power producers have various problems which they would present to the whole nation in the future, but even in the intermediate period, you're already beginning to see such particular problems. In the 38% increase which was sent by Eskom to NERSA, about 20 to 30% of that is constituted by demands from the independent power producers, which means independent power producers already are contributing to the rise in the prices of electricity. Secondly, you have problems with this because what they do is to de-risk the process of power generation. They try in the main to ensure that they de-risk such particular process so that government is the one that holds entire risk and guarantees whatever risk might arise in those particular markets. They have what they call lock-in clauses in the contracts they sign with government, but in the main also they have the issues around the financing of such particular independent power producers. Government, in one way or another, is still responsible to guarantee these people. It means, therefore, that government, having taken the risk of guaranteeing these particular independent producers, is actually allowing them to first socialize the risks of that particular production process, but at the same time privatize the profits coming out of that. We think it should not be allowed, and because we are for public ownership, we are not for the independent producers, but we recognize the need for renewable resources.
Crystal clear. I get your point, Trevor Shaku. I hear you completely. Thank you for that. That's Trevor Shaku from the South African Federation of Trade Unions. I think he makes his point quite clearly there, that they are for renewable energy, but not for the privatization of those processes through the independent power producers. They foresee and actually are championing for the state to have a key role in the energy generation system of the country.